So we'll move into our final presentation for today with Dr. Brenda Sautner. She's the Associate Superintendent at Fort McMurray Public School District. Dr. Sautner has a Doctor of Philosophy in Educational Administration and Leadership from the Department of Educational Policy Studies at the University of Alberta. She's fostered academic excellence in teaching and learning, in program evaluation, and policy development to ensure successful outcomes for students based on annual results from provincial accountability measures, as well as student responses from OurSCHOOL. So Dr. Sautner will highlight the aggregated results now that support two district-wide initiatives promoting healthy school environments and mental health and wellness. So please welcome her for her topic, using OurSCHOOL data to inform a focus on mental health and wellness in Fort McMurray Public Schools.
Thanks. Well, good afternoon. How are you? Good afternoon. Last one today. We kind of moved the podium over because as I was looking at this banner, research-based school improvement, including bullying, school safety, student engagement, school completion, student well-being, and drivers of student outcomes, I figured that's my job description. So I want to focus on today, it was using OurSCHOOL survey. How does this work here? Yeah. Okay. On the mental health and wellness in Fort McMurray Public School District, but I also thought, well, maybe today is how is the health and wellness of Fort McMurray Public School District. It was a year ago today that the realization set in that we weren't going to go back to our community for a period of time. And I do want to take this opportunity a year later, now that we've celebrated the 1-year anniversary, how we celebrated it, of thanking you for those of you, the school districts, school leaders, school principals, and staff who took in our students. That was huge. It was absolutely huge that a year ago, in fielding calls from parents, students, and staff, finding places not only for them to live, to stay, clothes on their backs. I realized I'm still in my evacuation clothes, so they've gone well for the past year. So I do thank you because I think it has boded well for how we've been able to recover, not only as a community, but as a school district. And I think that the results that hopefully will show you, we've been working at this for some time. It hasn't just been the last year, but I do thank the tell 'em for me. It's hard to change it to OurSCHOOL. Because we have been involved with this the last 4 or 5 years. And the work that we've been doing as a result of our data set has really prepared us well for what we have been experiencing in the past year. So this is our students. I always say we're a typical school district. We have our fair share of students who are English language learners, particularly newcomers to Canada. Our early childhood learning, we have a high growth in Fort McMurray. Cold winters of high birth rate, so we are forever expanding our early childhood programs. Our First Nations Métis Inuit is another area of responsibility. We just finished a review that I just put the action plan together last week. We are surrounded by 5 First Nations. We don't have a reserve connected to our district, but we do have a lot of students and families accessing our schools. And we do have a high percentage, or typical percentage, of students who meet the severely disabilities. So last year we have 5,500 students, of which we are down about 4% of the students and the families who return to our community. How do we know that? Some of the biggest indicators of the community population, it was 88,000, they estimate it's about 71,000. The first count was in the schools in terms of how many students re-registered. We have a lot of new students. We think you're yours, so we thank you for them. It's our turn to take them back in because we did get a handful of new students. We do have elementary schools, junior high, 3 high schools, 1 including our outreach school, Frank Spraggins. Interesting, we've been looking at the data set for our alternative program, our Christian programming, our Islamic programming, and the PEIF Athletic. which is now throughout most of our schools in terms of the sports enhanced programming. We actually have 2 schools opening up. Christina Gordon was supposed to open up this past September. It will now open up now that it's been restored. All our schools will be fully functioning in the new school year, and we will add another school, David McNeely Elementary School. So part of what we've been looking at is anxiety. This response rate is based on about 2,400 students, so it's about a 48% response rate, which has grown over time. And it's grown over time because of the value that our principals have put into the Tell Them For Me survey. We have the Provincial Accountability Survey. Part of my area of responsibility is the annual strategic plan and analyzing the results, not only for the Board of Trustees, but for senior admin, and working through our principals through their school growth plan to align it. I think the AERR and the provincial plan does a really good job of knowing where we are academically. But we are in a unique position in Fort McMurray as we're not going to have any academic data next year because the students were exempt. I did want to put in there the students who did write did exceptionally well, and it is a very small data set, but they didn't think that was really accurate. So what we are going to focus on for the purpose of today and the time frame is the healthy schools work that we've been doing and had been doing, as well as mental health, and that is the value added to this survey. And there are some more value added for you as school leaders in terms of measuring the impact of your policies. The other presentations were fantastic. We have the student advisory, we have the student voice, we have those initiatives, we do have the principals looking at their data, but what do you have to value the impact of your policies as a school leader and as a school district leader? Because this is now, we're able to aggregate over time, the last 4 years, this is the data we want as a school district. So how are we doing over time at the district level? And one of the things that we see here from elementary, keep in mind the green is this year. It's post-evacuation. The students filled the survey out in that window, December to the end of February. Then we evacuated last year. The green is this year. We still have higher rates of anxiety, but it's not so bad at the secondary level compared to where we were over the last couple of years. When this information came to our attention 4 years ago, we began a conversation with school counselors. Since then, we have more counseling in our schools. Because of course, we have mental health, but before the fire, we did not have a mental health therapist. What we did, though, is have conversations with mental health. 5 years ago, when I brought up how are we doing with the mental health needs, it had something to do with the file review for special ed funding that we realized we have a lot of students who are internalizing. And emotional needs, how are we meeting those needs? And I'll never forget, it was 6 years ago, one principal said to me, "We don't have those kids in our school." And knowing that one of our students was in the hospital at that time, my inner voice said, it's time. Mental health has become the new special ed. This is what we need to do, this is what we need to focus on, and this is the value. The driver for us in our school district for all the supports that we have been doing the past 5 years to get our counselors ready, our principals ready, and our staff ready is because of this data on anxiety and depression and the sense of belonging. In the past 5 years through this, we put a grant together with Alberta Health. We have done training in grades 3, 5, and 7 on the Friends program. We've done the self-harm for every single grade 7 student. We've done the Who Do You Tell. Our guidance counselors, we really had to get their headspace around because when I did a review of the resources that they were using, they were not designed with mental health in mind. So we had to get that going, and thank goodness with the wellness grant that we received, it started with the Healthy School Initiative. We then morphed into what are we doing to review mental health. We then have many regular monthly meetings with the community agencies in town that focus on mental health and wellness. And it's through that collective mandate, Mary Mandates, Braid Resources is one of the smartest things that we have done through our work in Fort McMurray, because we have more supports in our schools. They are aligned to school improvement, and initially it didn't cost us anything. We just did things differently. And we also redesigned the student health to the regional collaborative service delivery model for Wood Buffalo. And that was also significant in changing what we're doing. Our data, we also have another data set that's outside of this where our counselors keep data. Who do you see? When do you see them? What are you seeing for? And what are you doing with them? And how do you know you're effective? That's a whole different ballgame, but it started with our anxiety results being so high for kids, higher than the provincial average, higher than the national average, and we could not explain why. So our counselors got trained in cognitive behavior therapy 101, because we're not mental health therapists. We had to make sure that we stuck to our mandate. We've been trained in anxiety, depression. We have also done a lot on the self-harm. And these days, what we've been really looking at is mindfulness. Mindfulness for staff, mindfulness for students. Any comments on those results coming back a year later from the what our community has? Any questions? You're all intrigued, aren't you? Okay. So then I looked at it from a different angle and said, this is what I did during a principals meeting. So what I said, of all of our schools, where are they? Because then this gets into your resource allocation. So from this, 10 of our schools are above anxiety levels, 2 are in the middle of average when it's compared to the Canadian norms, and the 3 that were below average, which is a good thing on this particular measure. So then it begged the question, how do those schools get to be below average? One of them was our brand new school, and interesting enough, one of the schools that's also elementary and junior high is our Christian school. So I said, Joe, you're my favorite Christian. He's the parent. Why is it, the principal, why is it, he's a principal and a parent, why is it that you have below average anxiety? And Joe's really good at his data analysis. What do you think the response is from its alternative program, the Christian school? Come on, take a guess. Because we're trying to figure this out as well. They have faith. You got to have faith. And so there is something to be said about anxiety levels and faith-based programming. And this we did not know until we were able to manipulate the data in a way that we were looking at why it is that the schools were below and above, and having conversations with our principals who have really taken this information and worked it through with their staff. When we had this a couple of years ago, and going back to the previous slide, we decided what we needed to do is have a foundational understanding of what it means to be mental health and wellness. Don't get stuck in the stigma, get stuck on the wellness is what we need to do in the public education system to prevent and promote mental health and wellness. And once again, thanks to the wellness grant that we received and with support from community, because we had this data, we did share it, we weren't afraid of sharing this kind of data, particularly as why is trying to find the answers why, but more importantly, what are you going to do about it? So we were fortunate enough at this time, and it was our January district-wide PD day that everybody came to, is we brought in Clara Hughes. And if those of you that have heard Clara Hughes, she's a national spokesperson for Bell Let's Talk. We tied it in to the end of January. We looked at what was surrounding it because it wasn't a one-off. It had to start and kick off and lead to what we were doing in the next year. So Clara came in, we shared our data with her prior to her presenting. We also brought in all of our agencies in town who work with mental health and wellness, Canadian Mental Health, amazing group of people, Alberta Health, of course, some other solutions, a personal support network. We had developed those relationships early on in our data set because of our data, and they really did come through because what they're doing now is aligned to what we're doing as a school district, and that's critical. It can't be the one-off and whatnot. You really get greater coherence when they understand your data and understand the strategies that work with it. Clara did an amazing job. And we tied it in to the Bell Let's Talk Day, so we really got social media going. I think it got to a point where Michael Landsberg tweeted from Toronto, what's going on in Fort McMurray today? Well, it turns out that Clara Hughes was so impressed with what we were doing as a district, she came back again this past year and went straight to the middle school that's on average and engaged our junior high kids in Bell Let's Talk Day. It was an amazing, again, value added. You can't plan for stuff like that. Then we get into positive relationships. Think about the opportunity with the positive relationships and looking at our data set over the years and the trend, thinking what the community has gone through, in terms of we expected this to be worse than what it is. But again, these are students, 2,400 students reporting from grade 4 to grade 12. So we figured we're doing a pretty good job with the positive relationships. But then what we started doing is started kind of going a little deeper, which I would challenge if there's another version to come, Dr. Wilms. We have now moving into, we have safe and caring schools, which we've been at as a province for a long time, and we're now getting into the mental health. We're asking our principals to say, do your students who have gender identity issues have a sense of belonging? Do your students who are First Nations and Métis have a positive sense of belonging? Do your students who have special needs have a positive sense of belonging? So it does go across the different subgroups of students that we are dealing with. How do we disaggregate out that data without making the survey longer? Because what we've got many initiatives at play, but we're also dealing with a diverse group of students with many diverse issues. And all of these students need a sense of belonging. All of these students need to be engaged in school. They need to come to school because they want to, not because they have to. And I think that's really critical. When we looked at this data and saw with kind of our high school kids and whatnot, we thought, what is it we need to do? So through discussions with our principals and with the whole Truth and Reconciliation and with closing the achievement gap for our First Nations Métis, how do we tie this in such a way that it makes sense and adds value? So what we did was we said, okay, how do we get included all kids? And right now, I'm watching 13 Reasons Why. Finding 13 reasons why, 13 reasons is why. I'm thinking, how does that, because that's in the discourse of our student body. There are lots of media advisories out. Last night when I turned Netflix back on for just one more episode, it was 12:30, and I went, no, I can't do this because I'm almost at the end. Now they have a disclaimer on it. Part of that whole essence of what's in the discourse of students, and they're talking about it, and parents are talking about it, our staff aren't talking about it, we've got to enable the conversation to happen. 4 years ago, part of what started this is what's not in the public discourse is that we had 3 suicides in 1 year. 2 outside our community in the First Nations and 1 inside our community of a student who's in grade 6. It shocked us. And so part of the 13 reasons why we're having those conversations, and I tell you to have those professional conversations with your colleagues because it does speak to the sense of belonging. When we also applied it to the students who are First Nations Métis Inuit, we then brought in, and based on the success of last year's Professional Development Day for the whole district, we went back to Dr. Brokenleg, who came into town, and he spoke on the Circle of Courage and really nailed the sense of belonging for our teachers and for our administrators as well as it relates to like the responses that we get from our students. What the value added to that was that all of our staff heard the foundational, the Circle of Courage components, the sense of belonging, mastery, generosity, and independence. He tied the issue of the Truth and Reconciliation to residential schools and the post-traumatic stress that has resulted in that for generations, and tied it to what we experienced in the community. So it really resonated, and then we came back to the conversation as to what it is that we need to do to ensure that every student, no matter what group of student body that you are identified with, you have a sense of belonging. So what we've got over the time is we've got to measure the impact of our policies, our health promoting school environment. It's admin procedure 164. It's on our website. You can certainly download that. It does talk about daily physical activity, the nutrition. So we're right ahead of the game on the nutrition policy. We are using the healthy schools, the questions on food choices to measure the impact of nutrition policy, as well as we embedded it into mental health. We are also an Apple school district. Every elementary school in Fort McMurray, from the Catholic district to our district, are making healthy food choices because we jumped on the Apple bandwagon early. This really gives a policy support to the work that's being done to make healthy food choices. And because of our data, I can tell you that now that has given rise to another staff allocation of 0.5 across the district to help promote healthy schools and bring the pieces together, because what's happening is we do need to focus more on the wellness. And we need to focus on the wellness, and the other thing that we're going to look at is the high school nutrition. our kids in our high school, in the responses that they're giving to the questions on the survey, they are not choosing healthy most often. So we are going to be working on that and with our principals. So this was one thing that gives us value, and the trustees really like to know how their board policies are being not only implemented but evaluating. The Safe and Caring Schools, some of these questions you go back to. I would challenge you to add it through the gender diversity identity issue, because it is a nice fit. How do we know that we're making a difference in providing an inclusive, safe, welcoming, caring community for that group of students? Removing barriers to mental health, that's really what started our work in mental health. And this, when our school survey came along and we had a chance, we jumped at it, because the removing barriers is a system-to-system approach. When I first looked at this and started talking to counselors and said, we've got to do something different, Alberta Health said, we'll give you another therapist. And I said, no, thank you. And they said, oh my gosh. And I said, I think we need to do something different. So what they do fund and have funded for 5 to 6 years is a coordinator for mental health programming and support. So Natalie does the coordination, and Natalie's still coordinating it. But what we're looking is, how can Alberta Health work more effectively and remove these barriers to getting services and access to services in our region? And a good, if you want to have a good read of what the mental health promoting wellness is about, I encourage you to Google the Regional Collaborative Service Delivery for Wood Buffalo, RCSD WB Wood Buffalo, because we use the work of Adelman and Taylor to design our program, our Removing Barriers, but it is the same template, it's the same format, and it's the same framework that we use for RCSD. And it really is based on marrying mandate and braiding resources. So that is something that we're really quite pleased with, because it really has focused on prevention. And it really has got into what it is that we do for public education. So I encourage you, if you want more information on that. And then we're getting into the FNMI. Our administrative procedures, we've just redone them, so that's now done. Board approved that last year, so that's Admin Procedure 209, and if you want to have a look at that. Now we're looking at the high school completion. I could add a couple more up here in terms of what we're doing with our results of the OurSCHOOL survey. The high school completion rate, we are realizing, and we're looking at disaggregating our data, our students who are First Nations, Métis, Inuit at the high school level, we weren't supporting their mental health needs. And that is a separate knowledge base in terms of what do our First Nations and Métis community need. The devastation of the fire wiped out 3 communities, and the hardest hit was our Aboriginal families. And that is, we've lost our elders that was working in our school. 3 significant elders who were in our schools on a regular basis have lost everything. So we've had to kind of regroup that. So Alberta Health did come up to the table. This was 3 years ago, and they now do fund us for a high school counselor whose job is to get our First Nations Métis students to graduate with a focus on looking after their mental health. And of course the I results, really love that assessment tool, so thank you for the opportunity, and a shout out to Alberta Education for bringing that to our attention, and I really encourage Alberta Ed to please keep using it, please keep acknowledging it, and please keep paying for it. Okay. What we've done with the results of our I evaluation, I was telling Susan here, is we developed an early literacy framework, and that framework is an amazing piece of work that brought together our staff from transition from early childhood into grade 1. What do children need to know and be able to do to be ready for literacy? It was so well done. Our staff really have taken to it and made it a really classroom-friendly document, tying in differentiating instruction assessment for learning and planning. And now they're working on a numeracy framework, and it should be done, but we were somewhat interrupted. And with that, I tell you that in terms of overall, what's the value of this? Well, it's a little bit more motivating to work on the OurSCHOOL survey than the AERR, I have to tell you, having done that for 7 years. But other things too, when you use the value-added student voice, we have not had a recommendation for expulsion in 7 years. And we've got some pretty wicked behavior disorder kids. We do not have a program for kids with behavior disorders. They are fully included, and many of them are doing incredibly well. And our suspension rate over time has gone down significantly over 3 years, where we've gone from fighting to disrespectful behavior, which is a really nice problem to have. We are really looking at our Character Ed program as a result of what we've been through and our data, where we've gone past EBS, we've gone past tribes. We're now into the Leader in Me, tying it back into the school growth plans of citizenship, preparation for the world of work, broad program of study, and we're adding mindfulness. And mindfulness is amazing. I had to laugh because I haven't been a big fan of sensory rooms these days because the data hasn't shown that they're actually effective. Sorry. So what's happening is they're changing these rooms into mindful rooms, and with the training in mindfulness, they are actually making a great difference for the students who need a timeout, but also some staff have been found to be in there as well. So it's been really good for both groups, and we quite appreciate the training that we've been able to have. We are in the new year looking at resiliency. I do think there needs to be more work with the mental health needs of the students, a sense of belonging and positive relationships. We do need to, as a province, get at the social emotional learning, and hopefully there'll be an appetite now for having a framework, not only that we protect students' safety, but they help manage their emotions as well. And I would hope that that would be the next step. But really important, data matters. Without this data, we as a school district in Fort McMurray Public alone, we have now accessed about $1 million from Alberta Health, Alberta Health for mental health, because that is their mandate. But our data goes back to mental health. And it's that data that drives their decision making and knowing that they're getting value for dollar, because we are focused on the prevention and bringing down the high cost of expensive intervention. But it does tell why incredibly well into strategic planning, and our Board of Trustees really like this. So with that, I thank you, and I thank you because it's that positive use of the data that gives the positive results, and thank you once again for being there for us last year. Thank you.